Thanks for being here today for this Serious Sunday. Now today I'm going to discuss the subject of pride, be that trans pride, LGBT pride, gay pride, whatever you want to call it, whatever happens to be going on in your local area. And I wanted to talk about attending pride and being visible at specific times and specific events. Now this is based on something that I was asked about in a chat that I was doing earlier today, where I was asked about whether I'd be going to Pride this year. Now, first thing I'd say is I've been to a couple of Prides, but I've only ever been in guy mode. So I've never been to Pride in girl mode, for example. I've been to Brighton Pride a couple of times, and I've been in London for Pride weekend, but not actually in attendance of Pride. We were doing something else. There's a couple of concerts and stuff like that that happened to be, it's July, it's quite a busy time. And also last year Pride coincided with Sparkle, so I chose to attend Sparkle instead of attending Pride in London, which is relatively close to it. It's obviously a massive event, which means I wasn't there for some of the kind of hijacking type things that were going on with the TERFs, who were getting up to the front of the Pride March and presenting quite an anti-trans image. And I'm hoping that for this year, the actions that were taken last year might lead to something of a more visible presence for the trans community at Pride. Like I said, I've been to several Prides, but I've found that for the most part, when I go out in the evenings, if it's what you might call a traditional gay Pride, I find that there's a relatively lower turnout for trans people. And my experience, for example, of going out to Brighton Pride for the first time was that it was, again, a pretty relatively low turnout, and especially in the evening, for actually going out, I couldn't find very many people who were trans. I was going out dressed, and I couldn't find many people who were trans and out and about. So I struggled a little bit with that. But that may just be down to me turning up on my own, not knowing the places to go, not knowing the right places, and being a little bit more savvy these days than I was back then. Now, with what happened last year at London Pride, with the front of the march being taken over by these TERFs being trans exclusionary radical feminists, it's not a term that they necessarily like or have labelled themselves with. It's a label they've been given largely, I think, by the trans community. And these TERFs are essentially campaigning against what are men, like me, invading the space of women and basically taking away from the rights of women, or basically acting in a way that is detrimental to women in general, because we are clouding the issue of women's rights, because we are men coming in and kind of taking over a little bit. And I thought it was a shame what happened last year with these people presenting this anti-trans sort of message. It's yet another example of how this whole LGBT thing, sometimes and quite often the T doesn't sit well with the LGB, and it can be somewhat problematic to try to keep everyone inclusive and try to keep everyone together. A lot of people would perhaps prefer to get the T out of the LGBT, whether that's the gay community wanting the T out, or sometimes it's the trans community feeling we'd be better off separated. And this sometimes takes place, for example, in the fact that Brighton has its own trans pride. And some people look to do things that are specific to the trans community to sort of keep ourselves as separate from the LGB part. And I think this is, for the large part, quite well-meaning, this intention to separate trans from the gay community, from the lesbian bisexual community, and to separate out what is a form of gender expression or gender identity issue from something that is sexuality. Because whether you're in the trans community or not, you might be straight, you might be bi, you might be gay, you might be lesbian, you will be whatever you happen to be. So most trans people are either also lesbian, gay, bisexual, or straight. And given that we're trans, sometimes those labels don't work particularly well. I thought this was just an interesting thing to talk about. So for this year, I'm going to make an extra special effort to go to Pride, particularly to go to Pride dressed as Juliette, and to try to represent as best as I can the ambitions of our community to be seen, to be visible, and to be represented. Itch my ear. And I find myself especially motivated to do this by what happened at London Pride last year. A lot of my friends who are in the trans community, they are perhaps transitioning, for example, or they might just be cross-dressers, whatever they happen to be. A lot of my friends make it a point to go to Pride, and I feel like it's one of those things that I should make more effort to do. It sometimes clashes with holidays and other bits and pieces, and it makes it a bit difficult to attend. Particularly for me, it tends to be during the end of term time. So it's something where I need to take time away from my family during term time, and it can be a little bit difficult to organise. But I feel that for this year, it's an important thing to go along to and do, and it's worthwhile reviewing. So with regard to Pride versus Trans Pride, my view is that I think Trans Pride has an important place. I think Trans Pride is a lot less prevalent around the country, so if you're going to be attending a Trans Pride type march, it's more likely to be in a specific venue with people who are politically active. You know, Brighton's a very good place, for example, a good example of a trans community. But I sometimes worry about what this does in terms of separating out the trans community from the gay community. I'm not sure I like the idea, personally, of having a choice between a Brighton Pride and a Brighton Trans Pride. The idea that pride as a word, with the rainbow flag, etc., is something that isn't inclusive enough to accommodate most trans people. I think it's more a worrying thing for the concept of pride in general. Why it is that perhaps trans pride isn't necessarily recommended in the same way, and I think that's something of a concern for me. Is that I've never felt particularly the need to go to a trans pride. I've always felt that pride was enough, and it's the kind of thing that we should be seen at, particularly right now, particularly with these kind of efforts to somewhat exclude the trans community. And while I may not represent you, so whatever you do within the trans community, I may not represent you. I am certainly a specific subset of the trans community. I'm not everything. I'm not. I don't represent everyone within this wider trans community by any means. It's just important that people like me, people like you, feel that we can attend, feel that we can be seen, we can be present, we can represent. And I think that's increasingly important as we move forward. And I do like the idea this year of pushing myself to attend Pride and to be more active and be a little bit more visible. It's something I've been trying to do piece by piece, little by little, as I normalise this within my life. And YouTube is a strong part of that. But the idea of being politically active, of being politically motivated, of speaking out on issues is something that's probably only been part of my repertoire, part of my thinking process for the last year or so. Transgender Day of Visibility, Transgender Day of Remembrance, these are things that haven't in the past been high on my radar, and Trans Pride or Pride marching itself hasn't been high on my radar. And I think it's something I need to address. So for this year, if I can, I'm going to attend at least one Pride march. I'm going to attend as Juliette, and I'm intending to be there as a bold, outgoing, positive representative of this community in the face of whatever else happens to be thrown my way in terms of resistance or support or whatever else comes along. Hopefully more support than resistance, but I think it's time to add myself to that. I think it's a shame I haven't been previously, to be frank, and it's about time. So that was it for this Serious Sunday, just to talk about this. I think it's an important event. It's something I regret not doing sooner, and it's something that I think is one of those things that perhaps we should aspire to do more than just the going out clubbing type event. Certainly for myself, I would say that my desire to go out and have fun, to enjoy myself, isn't something I feel guilty for, but I do feel that I could have done more to be promotional of the normalcy of what I do, especially at events like Pride. And I think that's the next thing. It's a thing to go and do and try to become a somewhat more regular and visible voice and face to accompany that. So I hope this video was useful or of interest to you. Thank you for taking the time to watch it. If you have any comments, please do let me know in the comment section down below. I look forward to receiving those and to answering as many of them as I can. You can also reach me through my email address, juliettesnoir@gmail.com, or the website, julietnoir.uk. Feel free to like, share and subscribe. Click the little bell to stay notified on upcoming videos, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon. As ever, bye! Bye!